running around doing the infantry stuff for a couple of years, and the Marine Corps had a law program, which my roommate told me about. I didn't even believe him. And you apply for it. So I applied for it thinking, well, I'm not going to get this. And then I got selected, and my next duty station was law school, a good duty station if you can get it. And so I did that. I went to the College of William and Mary School of Law. I loved every minute of it. And then I became a judge advocate, and I served as an attorney for the last 8 years of my service. Literally loved every minute of it. People will say, thanks for your service. And I tell people, you don't have to thank me. This was the most fun I've ever had. My last duty station, I was a geographic bachelor, and so I was stationed in one place. My family had moved here to Middle Tennessee, and I had made my decision to get out. I was fortunate enough to be able to retire. They offered an early retirement for attorneys, and so I said, well, I'm your man. So I got to retire from the Marine Corps, which was an excellent opportunity because I got to come home and be dad. And then I looked for Act 2 of my life. And that's usually the next question I get is, okay, Marine and now Eldercare law attorney, how do we make that transition? And I did kind of fall into it. I was looking for something to make a difference. And I had that for the first 15 years of my professional life. Every day I woke up, I put on that uniform, I walked into work, and I knew I was making a difference in my Marines' lives, making a difference in other people's lives when we're deployed. And you love that feeling, and you grow to need that feel. You want that feeling. You want to make a difference every day. And as I got out, I experienced what every veteran experiences when you get out. It's a different society than the one you've been into for the last 15 years. It's a different world. And I always tell people the military is just kind of a microcosm, but it is. We have our own little quirks. Dana will tell you I have my own language that my office has been nice to pick up on. We kind of have translations, so when I use little terms here and there. But I started out by helping veterans. There's VA benefits out there, and you have veterans who unfortunately are struggling. And where you really see it struggling are the older veterans. And aging is expensive, and it's getting more expensive by the day. And it's kind of crept up on us. Elder law 30 or 40 years ago wasn't really a thing. But as medicine has continued to advance, and we're obviously all grateful for that, but it comes with the law of unintended consequences, and that is everyone's living longer, and they're living with more difficult conditions, and they're living requiring a great deal more of care than they had in the past. And so I started out helping veterans work on their VA benefits, and then it just simply expanded from there. And then I was very fortunate enough to get attached with Takis McGinnis, and it's probably the best professional decision of my life. It really is. I have found a home, and I'm so happy to be there. So let me talk to you about the 10 things that you need to know. And these are important because getting older, there is a science to it. And we often don't look at it like that, because when you wake up and it's just something that's going to happen to us all, well, I'm just going to get old. That's what everyone does. It's not anything special. It's not anything unique. We all do it. But it doesn't mean it's not something to be studied, and it doesn't mean it's not something to be prepared for. And I certainly learned that in the service, that you can prepare for everything. And the more prepared you are in any facet of your life, the better off you're going to be. So let me see if I can... I have a little clicker issue here. Let's try this again. There we go. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about, everyone thinks of the will. The will's my most important. I got to have a will. And people come in all the time, and those are my favorite meetings. Is someone will come in and they'll say, Chris, I need a will. And I'm like, that's awesome. That's not how I'll start a meeting. I'll let them get it out, and I'll say, okay, here's what I need to know. And I want to know 3 things. First, what brought you into our office? There's always a reason. There was some impetus, because I'll tell you right now, estate planning is the easiest thing to push off to the right, to slide down the, I'll do that tomorrow. Our lives, they're crazy. They really are. We all are attached to our smartphones. We've got meetings, for those that have kids, you got sporting events and school events, and there are days you wonder how you keep the train running on the tracks. And we're busy. There is a reason they came to see us. And when you know that reason, it really starts helping, because that reason will usually start answering the second question is, what are your worries? What are you worried about? Because at the end of the day, if we're serving our clients right, we're allaying some of their fears, some of their concerns. That's what estate planning does on top of everything else and all the tangible benefits. I tell every client, listen, this is supposed to give you some peace of mind. And if that's not happening, then we haven't really gotten to the root issues here. So let's get down to them. And then the third thing is, what are your goals? And it seems silly. You're like, well, they want an estate plan. You'd be surprised what their answers are. But I always say, why do we say what the goals are? Because you always want to start with the end in mind. When you're starting with the end in mind, you know what your destination. When you pick a vacation, what's one of the first things you choose when you do a vacation? You choose the location. Can't choose your flight until you have a location. Can't choose your hotel till you have a location. Can't choose your activities. We got to know where we're going. And everyone thinks it's the will. And it's not that a will is an unimportant document. But a will is probably the most perfunctory basic document there is. A will covers your probate assets, your probatable assets. Well, those are such things as your bank accounts that aren't beneficiary designated. Anything that's left to your estate would flow via your will. But you don't have to do that. And I always tell people probate it's not a scary process. I think it is for people who don't go through it every day. For us, it's Tuesday. It's let's go to court, go to probate. Easy peasy. However, there are things that come along with it that are negative. The first is you got to make reports to the court, inventories, accountings, all these. There are a lot of administrative requirements, and it's disruptive. The second thing, and to me the most important thing, is you've lost a great level of privacy. When you open probate, you have to file a petition. It's a public record. On that petition, you are naming the heirs in the will. You're naming the heirs at law in case the will becomes invalidated. And frighteningly, you are giving an estimate of the value of the estate. What you have done is published. These people are about to have a lot of money. And we know in today's society, with all the scammers and all the nefarious people out there, you are not doing those people any favors. And often it has no stipulations. We all know for some people, a big inheritance of money isn't the best thing in the world. And there are better ways to do it. Trust planning is a great way to have those things flow through. And beneficiary designations on your IRA accounts, 401ks, on your bank accounts, turn a probatable asset into a non-probatable asset. Anything you can do to avoid that public process, you are doing your client a big service. And even more importantly than that, the will doesn't often provide any asset protection. And again, talking about not being your most important estate planning document, if we're talking about using your will, you have passed away. During your lifetime, your healthcare power of attorney, your general power of attorney, those are the documents that are going to fix problems during your lifetime. And we're going to get to that here in a second. The truth about conservatorships. So I talk about a power of attorney. In our realm, we deal with elderly people every single day. One of the first questions that inevitably will come up at some point, and it's on its face, it's pretty clear, do they have capacity or not? Now, the vast majority of our clients obviously have capacity, and they come in, you have a conversation for 5 minutes, you go, okay, I know we're good to go here. But every once in a while, they don't. And it is devastating to tell a family that a very simple document that they could have executed at any time over the last 20 or 30 years would save them the journey they're about to go on. And that journey is a conservatorship. You can't act legally on someone's behalf without some authority. And so I always liken the example I use is Microsoft Word. We're all familiar with it, and you can highlight text and you can cut and paste or copy and paste. Well, when we turned 18 years old, we all had a set of legal rights as adults. We could sign contracts. We could open bank accounts, open checking accounts. There are all sorts of things that you can do legally as an 18-year-old that when you were 17, you can't do. And you have those legal rights for the rest of your life, or so we believe. But then what happens is maybe you have a stroke. Maybe you lose capacity, you're in an accident, you have a fall, have a traumatic brain injury. And I'm telling you, everyone talks about, well, this is never going to happen to us. We see it every day. We really, really do. And it's devastating because what happens is if you have a power of attorney, you've got it. You have someone, that power of attorney is what I like to refer to the copy and paste function. You have copied your legal rights and you have given someone else the authority to act on your behalf. They're not the boss of you. The parents love hearing that, by the way, when you execute a power of attorney and make one of their children the power of attorney. I remind them, they're not the boss of you, mom or dad. They are here to help you, and they'll be like, you heard that, right? And they enjoy that. They like knowing they're taken care of. You have a fiduciary obligation to do what's in their best interest, and that helps immensely. But if they don't have capacity to execute that legal document, if they can't comprehend what they're doing, or just don't even have the physical or mental ability to sign it at that point, you're going down the road of a conservatorship. And a conservatorship is expensive to start out, and that's just the first layer of it. You have to go to court. Now, this is America. We're very much an individual rights country, and we care about it greatly. So when you go to court and say, I want to take this person and I want to strip their right, I want to highlight all of their rights and I want to cut them. I want to cut and paste. They no longer have the ability to act on their own behalf. That is a big deal. And the court takes that exceedingly seriously. They're going to appoint an attorney ad litem, for no other reason than to represent what we refer to as the potential ward, the person who's looking at having their rights stripped away. They're going to be evaluated most likely by 2 doctors, and they're going to make a determination, is this in their best interest? The court is going to want to make sure that this is the only option. It's kind of the last resort. If we can do something less and take care of this person, we will, because we don't, as a society, want to strip away someone's individual rights. Now, here's the uglier part of it. Oftentimes, people disagree over what's best for mom or dad. What's the best medical treatment? What are the best financial decisions? And you're going to have siblings. And anyone here who has a sibling, know we don't always get along. I got 4 of them. And the 5 of us could not be more different people. We all love one another. We all care for one another. But boy, there are not 5 more different people on this earth. And getting us all to agree and come together on something would probably be tricky. Well, now you have a conservatorship. Someone's going to have to be designated to be in charge. Family disputes are the worst disputes. And this is what's going to happen is there is going to be a fight over who's best to do it. And those fights, and I've been a part of them, they get ugly and they break apart families. And you don't want to let that happen. And so I jump up and down. Get this stuff locked in ahead of time. Don't sow the seeds for this kind of stuff by putting off this planning. Execute this very simple document. Every ship needs 1 captain. That's a big philosophy of mine. People say, well, I want to make the siblings. I've got 2 children. I want them to be co-power of attorney. You can do that. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Philosophically, with tears in my eyes, I will beg them not to do it. Because what will happen is, if they disagree, that power of attorney is worthless because they need to agree. Unless you stipulate language that says if they disagree, then one's in charge. And if you're going to put that language in there, then just put that one person in charge and save all the heartache and trouble. And the best part, here's the best part about doing that when you are living, when you have capacity, when you are strong and vibrant. You can sit down with the children. You're going to hear this often throughout, and you can say, this is what I want. Honor, what 10 commandments, honor thy mother and father. You honor us by honoring our wishes. And I'm a big believer in that. You tell them, listen, this is what we want. I don't want you guys fighting over this because this is the way we've wanted it. And what I want you to do is execute what we have asked you to execute. It makes a huge difference. Now, having the conversation, it's not just letting them know what the plan is. It's letting them know what you want. Especially, and I emphasize this, the healthcare power of attorney. When our plan is finalized, they have a binder. I call it the football. I mean, it's the thing you take everywhere. It's got all the original documents. It's got their original wills. It's got their original powers of attorney. It's got whatever trust documents are in there. It has the deeds that have been executed, and it has memorandums that explain what everything is. So someone can pick that up, not knowing anything, and they can open that binder and they can immediately familiarize themselves with what's happening. There's an estate plan summary where they will see who all the key players are. Our information's right in front. Tucked in the front pouch is a workbook called Do You Know My Wishes? And I emphasize with every client to fill that workbook out. It's a hard conversation to have. I've had it with my dad. I'm my dad's power of attorney. I think probably not a big stretch to guess that. And we sat down and we had this conversation. And what was funny was, here's how the conversation went. Dad and I've kind of been going back and forth. We need to, we always say it in the generic, like, well, we just need to tie up all the loose ends, get our ducks in a row. We don't want to talk about what we're really talking about, because what we're talking about is dying. No one likes talking about that. And so we finally sit down and we take care of the small stuff. And my dad says, okay, let's talk about the big question. And I kind of joke and I'm like, well, what question's that? And he goes, oh, come on, Chris. He's like, if something happens to me, Dad, I got the plan. You're not going to die and everything's going to be just fine. And of course, he looked at me and he is like, how do you do this he goes, you have this conversation with clients every day. How are you saying that? And I share that story with clients every day, because what I tell them is, I advise the clients to have this conversation and I talk to them about how difficult it is. And one of the things I emphasize is, it's easy for me to do that. No matter who you are, it's hard to have that conversation. I do it every single day. It was a hard conversation. It was different when it was my dad, when it was my family member. It is not easy. I don't want to think about a day when my dad isn't in this world. I know what'll happen. It happens to every single one of us. But I wasn't a big fan of talking about it either. And I share that with you to let you know, I understand how difficult it is, but you still got to have it. They got to know what the wishes are. I've experienced someone sitting in my office and they did want a joint decision. Thankfully, we had an odd number of siblings, but they looked at me in the eye and said, everyone's going to make a decision together. And after a while of fighting it, it finally popped in my head, well, there's got to be a reason for this. There has to be something. We're at a sticking point. I didn't understand why. And sure enough, I said, explain it to me. Explain to me like I'm 6 years old, because I serve my clients and I want them to be happy. I want every client to walk out having the best plan, but also a plan that they are happy to have. And they told me the story that they were the power of attorney for their parent. And they had a very difficult decision. And they looked me in the eye and they told me two things. They said they obviously had to withhold medical treatment. And they said, I know I made the right decision on behalf of my parents. And I know that my siblings never forgave me. And that was a hard moment to listen to. And it was a hard moment to listen to, not just how difficult that must have been to live through, but how preventable it is. That is a preventable event. And so there are all sorts of resources out there where you can go. And I mean, today's world, everything's at your fingertips. But that workbook makes it easy. You go through and you answer some questions. But those conversations are going to make a huge difference, because oftentimes the kids are going to get thrust. Remember, we don't plan a stroke. We don't plan a car accident. We don't plan a fall and a broken hip. Those things pop up. They're little gremlins that jump up and bite us. And you don't want to wait and then go, I don't know what the plan is. You want your kids and you want everyone in the family to know what it is ahead of time. All right. So speaking of when those little gremlins come up, this is when long-term care happens. And the first mistake that everyone thinks is, well, doesn't Medicare take care of that? No, Medicare is going to take care of hospitalizations and treatments and things like that. Medicare is not a long-term care solution. You have Medicaid, you have TennCare, and that is a long-term care solution. However, there are lots of stipulations on it, and usually the only stipulation that people know there are usually two. If they're educated, there are two. The one most people know is, well, I got to have less than $2,000. It's not for me. And then the second one is, they're going to take my house after I pass away. And both of those things on some level are not incorrect statements, but they are far, far from correct statements. And you need to make sure, again, what are we talking about right at the beginning? If I have the planning done ahead of time, I'm not going to run into these problems in the future. And so skilled nursing care, I'm going to get to the continuum in a little bit, but skilled nursing care, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month. I mean, it can run a bill of up to $100,000 a year. Now you think about that. Most people in our country don't make $100,000 a year. You'd have to earn that just to allow another person to live with the care they require. That's incredible. And it's almost an indictment on our system when you think about it. That is an unbelievable statistic. So this actually lends nicely to our next slide, the elder care continuum. This is the science behind it. And this is the part that people really don't think about. And I love this slide because you really can start breaking down how this is going to happen. So you have your functional curve, you have your, what I kind of refer to as your domicile and care curve, you have your cost curve, and then you have your resource curve. So let me talk about that top one. That top one is your functionality line. When you're on the left side here, what I call it is your independent dependent. This left side, you are fully independent. You turn 18 years old, and for the most part, you were fully independent. Maybe you were coming back home for a couple of years, but at some point within a few years of that, you were out on your own and you were living life. You have lived life like that for 40, 50, 60 years. And what happens is when you do anything one way for most of your life, it's hard to recognize when it isn't that way anymore. And so I always like to joke, this line actually extends a mile back that way because you've been on that independent part the whole time. And then what happens is little things happen. And I like to joke, and usually my clients laugh about it, I've started traveling down that line. This year, I got these. It's a small thing, it's a little thing, but I held out probably 2 or 3 years longer than I should have before I got them because I'm stubborn. But I finally got them because I just, you're sitting here looking at a computer, you're going to have to protect your eyes after a while. Then what happens is it's other things. Maybe you don't want to knock out the lawn anymore and you pay the kid down the street. That's something. Maybe you don't want to do the high dusting in the house, the ceiling fans and the top shelves. I shouldn't be getting on a step stool anymore. You're traveling down the curve. Now, those are little things, and those are things we don't think of because we can make those go away pretty easily. $20 an hour to the kid down the street, have someone come in once a week and just do some little cleaning, straightening up around the house, not a big deal. But then what happens is it starts to get more significant. Then what we start running into is what we call the activities of daily living. Maybe I shouldn't be preparing my own meals. Maybe I have the inability to dress myself anymore. Maybe I need assistance in the shower. And those are tough conversations to have because that really gets down to the heart of who we are as individuals. It's our independence. And people don't like to admit that they're not independent anymore. That is a hard conversation. If I went to any one of you and told you today, you're going to need a little help in the shower, you're going to be like, get out of my house. And that's a natural reaction. It really is. And you have to work through that. And you kind of have to, like anything else, you have to help them come to that realization. These are two actual conversations. These are two of my favorite conversations I've ever had because they were so stunning. They've stuck with me forever. But I'm going through the activities of daily living with families. We're trying to talk, at this point, we were talking about VA benefits and whether or not they'd be applicable. And I said, can mom and dad dress themselves? Oh yeah, mom and dad can dress themselves. They can get their shirt on, get their pants on. They can't do their shoes and socks anymore. I said, okay, so where can they go? And they looked at me and they were kind of confused. And I said, well, where can they go? They can go to the beach. I know that. Well, they can't go to church. They can't go to school. They can't go to the store. They can't go to a restaurant. They can't go anywhere. Our society, you don't have shoes and socks on shore of the beach, you can't be there. And it stunned them. They were thinking, well, they can do it most of the way. And I think that's how a lot of us grade ourselves. You have to redefine your grading scale. These activities of daily living are pass fail. You can't sort of feed yourself. You can't sort of prepare your own meal. Either you can or you can't. You can't sort of dress yourself. And you could see the proverbial light bulb pop, and it was a moment. And then the other one, which this still will be my all-time favorite, I think forever, was we were going through them all and we got to preparing their own meals. Can mom and dad, can they prepare their own meals? Oh yeah, mom is the greatest cook. She's cooked her whole life. We love her food. She cooks every day to this day. We only called the fire department 3 times this month. And I said only. And I sat there stunned. And they said, well, yeah, the grease fire, the curtains caught on fire, the backsplash. And I was so stunned, I was at a loss for words. I said, what do you mean only? And they said, well, it happens from time to time. I said, how many times have you called the fire department on yourself? So I'm speaking with the adult children here. And they said, well, Chris, we never call the fire department. And you can see the switch flick. This was their normal. And when you live this, and let me do them a favor, obviously anonymously. This was their life. They woke up every morning. They got their kids ready to school and off to school. They went to mom and dad's house, got mom and dad up and ready for the day. They went to their jobs. They worked all day. They finished their jobs and went to school, picked up the kids, got them to their after school activities, got those done, dropped the kids off at home, fed them, went over to mom and dad's, made sure they were fed, got them ready for bed. Once that was done, they got home. They had about 2 minutes to themselves, and then they collapsed. And you know what they did? The next day, they did it all over again. They did that every day for about 3 years. They were done. They were exhausted, and they didn't know it because this was their normal. Think about what their social life was like. Where do you find out that isn't normal? Well, you're talking to your friends and your neighbors, and someone will tell you, man, that doesn't seem normal. But their social circle was like that. They didn't have time for anything else. They were caring for everyone under the sun. And caregiver burnout is a real thing. And those signs have to be seen. And here's why. After you have the functionality curve and determining where you're down there, we have, where are you living? Home sweet home. This is where everyone wants to live. Every plan starts out with that. Every person who comes in, and this is their plan. Chris, I'm going to live at home until, this was an actual quote, until I'm taken out feet first. And I was like, well, we don't want that to happen that way, obviously. That's everyone's plan. I want everyone to live at home. I think everyone wants everyone to live at home. That's where you're comfortable. That's where you feel safe. That's where your stuff is. It's where you feel surrounded by the things that matter in your life. And so what I tell people is, it's not that I don't want you to live at home. I want you to live in a place where you are receiving the care that you require. And that's the emphasis. And here's why. If you are down here on the care curve, on the functionality curve, but you are still living back here, what happens is we call this triangle that it makes, where you should be living, where you are living, and where your care require. When this lags behind this, you're in the danger zone. And why is that dangerous? It's dangerous because if your care needs aren't being met, you're increasing your risk for a catastrophic medical event. And nothing will increase your costs of just life more than a catastrophic medical event. Because if you fall and break your hip, if I fall and break my hip, it's going to stink. I'm going to be out a little bit at work. I'm going to have surgery. I'm going to have, probably 6 or 8 month rehab and the whole 9 yards. But at the end of the day, at 43, I'm going to be back at work. I'm still going to be earning money. I'll probably be knock on wood, 80 or 90% of what I once was, and I'll be fine. But if you are 70 years old, 80 years old, and you fall or break your hip, that's a major event. You're going to have surgery. Out of surgery, you're almost inevitably going to be in the ICU. And you are not going to get back to 90% of the way you are, most likely. You are going to have significant impairments for the rest of your life. And if that fall happened because you refused to put a handrail in the shower, something as simple as that. If it happened because you have a 2-story house and are refusing to move down to 1 level and not deal with steps anymore, my personal opinion is you've made a mistake. And here's the mistake you've made. If you don't tell life what's going to happen, life will tell you. Life will always make the final decision. And if you can stay ahead of it, and if you can recognize I need help. Now, nothing says that you can't have the help at home. There are all sorts of in-home caregivers. And that takes me to my next level is it comes down to the cost of care. And now all of this lines up. This curve is done really purposefully done. So what we have is no functional living at home, no extra money. Obviously we have our normal costs, but you have no additional money. But then when you have at home with assistance, you have some money. I'll break it down for you. Reputable caregivers, you can expect to pay about $20 an hour. That's a good, fair price for a reputable in-home caregiver. Now, I always say that because this is a dangerous thing to have low on the cost curve, and I'm going to come back as to why. But you move into a retirement community, independent living, depending where you're at, $2,500, $3,000, maybe $3,500 if you're at a real nice independent living. Then you can move into an assisted living facility, $4,000, $4,500. There's memory care kind of between nursing home and assisted living for those that are suffering with the real debilitating diseases, Alzheimer's and dementia. And then you have the nursing home. Nursing home can be $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a month, just absolutely devastating. But here's the thing, at home with assistance. So I have people, if someone needs 24-hour care, can they have in-home caregivers? Yeah, there are in-home caregivers that'll come and give you 24-hour care. Here's the cost. $20 an hour, 24 hours a day, 30 days a month, $15,000, probably minimum for a single caregiver if you're just having one there. It adds up quickly. And so a lot of people come in with the solution of, I'm just going to hire in-home caregivers. And if you just need some spot stuff, maybe preparing a couple of meals, getting the house straightened up and whatnot, it's doable. But you have to be realistic with the cost curve because it's a finite resource. We have so much money. And what we want to do is make that money last as long as possible. So then what we have are the resources that we can draw on. We have private funding. So that's just taking care of yourself. There's VA benefits. The VA benefit's very unknown. You try and get the word out on it. I think it's becoming more and more known, certainly in the realm assisted living communities. They know it well. Nursing homes, skilled nursing care, they know it well. But at the end of the day, it is a reimbursement benefit. If the veteran or the veteran's spouse is suffering from catastrophic medical costs to the point that it really eats down most or all of their monthly income, it will reimburse up to a certain level. If you're a married veteran, $2,230. If you're a single veteran, around $1,800 a month. If you're a surviving spouse, $1,200 a month. And so it can make a difference. Now, it doesn't solve every problem. But think about it, if you're a married veteran, you and your wife need an assisted living facility, and you have a Social Security of $1,400. Your wife has Social Security, lags behind a little bit, probably $800, $900. So you've got about $2,400, $2,500. And then you move into assisted living facility because you need help with activities of daily living and you're going to need the aid and attendance benefit. You're paying $4,500 a month. You're upside down. Your costs are outstripping your income. They have $2,300, even if they have a small pension or making $3,000 a month, their costs are upside down. If the resource limits are low enough, and it's about $127,000 right now, $127,061. If the resources fall below that, your house isn't countable, your car isn't countable, your personal effects are not countable in that, what happens is it'll turn on that $2,230. What does that $2,230 do? It fills that gap. It's really tailored to fill that gap and help these people out so they can live in a safe and secure environment and receive the care they need and not suffer because of the crippling costs of this. Then there are other community services out there. Obviously, we have, they're getting their Social Security checks. We have family caregivers, and I explained to you about the family caregivers. A lot of people rely on that. That's our job. It's our jobs as sons and daughters. It's to take care of mom and dad. And I believe that. I believe it wholeheartedly. But remember that for most of us, we're not skilled nursing providers. We're not. We don't know. We don't have the requisite expertise. We also have day jobs, a great many of us. My grandmother lived with us. She lived with us while I was in high school. It was, it was It was a fun ride. It was great having grandma with us. She was, full of life and stories. She suffered from dementia. And so all the stuff that happens, I got to witness it firsthand. I wish I knew then what I knew now, or what I know now, just on dealing with people who have dementia, and how you can work through those difficulties that appear, because they don't understand anymore. And you try. I mean, I'm an attorney and I'm a Marine. I was an engineering major. Let me tell you, logic. I love logic. And that is the last thing to do with someone with Alzheimer's or dementia. You're trying to make sense with someone who can't make sense anymore. And most people will think that way. And it does not lend itself well. And the other thing is caregiver burnout. That is a real thing. People will exhaust themselves and they won't even realize it. And so you have to watch that very closely. But that is the continuum of aging. And in one way, shape, or form, we're all going to go through it. Now, one of the big misnomers, you have to sell everything to pay for care. Absolutely not. The proper, prudent planning done ahead of time makes all of the difference in the world. But people will come, they're like, we just sold the house. And you're just like, come to us before you make the big decisions. I wish, the other disappointing one is when someone comes in and says, well, my spouse just passed away and we realized we should get this taken care of. And the difference that we could have made a year before that spouse passed away it's devastating. It's devastating because now you have someone whose financial picture might be uncertain, and it didn't have to be that way. And it is making sure that whenever you do anything, go talk to the experts ahead of time. And you need to imbue that in the people out there and in the education. I get this question all the time as we're going through the planning and we're looking at the appropriate trust structure and everything else, and someone will look at me and it'll inevitably come out, Chris, why doesn't everyone do this? I get that question every week, and I say they don't know. And it's devastating to tell people that. I say, I wish everyone did this stuff, but not everyone does. And so what we do is we try and get the word out there and get people educated so that people don't have to lose everything. So the risks of using TennCare. So not taking Medicaid estate recovery seriously. Here's what estate recovery is. If you go on TennCare and you own a home, they will not penalize you for owning the home. They won't count it as a resource against you. They're not going to make you sell it. They're not going to make you move out of the home. Our legislators are not dumb. They know that if they require that, and all our senior citizens, who's our greatest voting bloc, if we were making them move out of their home, that would not last very long whatsoever. But they do want to keep the program solvent. I'm a big, fiscal responsibility is good. And so one of the ways they do it, and up for debate on what people think as far as the wiseness of it goes, but it is the law, so it is what it is. After you pass away, when the home gets sold, TennCare can ask to be reimbursed for what they have paid on your care. Now, if you've been on TennCare for 3 or 4 months, not the end of the world. If you've been on TennCare for 3 or 4 years, the house is probably gone. And it does not have to be that way. Taking your home, putting it into a trust, that frustrates estate recovery. There's a penalty period. They have a look back period of 5 years. So I have people who are recently retired. They come to me, Chris, we own our house outright. Here's what our assets look like. We have a home. I say, who do you want your home to go to? Well, we want it to go to the kids. Great. Let's put it in an irrevocable trust for their benefit. Put it in trust and it is protected. It starts the 5-year look back clock. They still have a right to reside in that home forever. So they'll still live there. Everything else will remain the same, but now the home is deeded in the name of the trust. At their passing, the home passes on to the kids like it would have in their will. What I like saying is it's like taking your estate plan and putting it on its head. Usually what we all think of is I live my life. When I pass away, my stuff goes to my kids. Well, you can start making some of those distributions early. How does it impact your life, whether the trust owns the home or you own the home? Can you live there? That's why you have the home. And so you put it in that trust, it's protected. And people are like, well, Chris, why do I have to bother with that? Why don't I just give it? Why don't I just give it to the kids? And my favorite quote at Tim's, and I laugh because the first time he said it, I wrinkled my nose a little bit because I thought to myself, hey, I'm still a kid. But Tim will always say, if you start giving stuff to your children, you're giving it to the least reliable people on earth. And I laughed a little bit and then I didn't think it was so funny. And now I laugh at it again. It is to some extent true. It's not a shot at the children. It's just they have a lot going on in their lives. Maybe they have a new marriage. If you give that house to them and they get a divorce, that's your child's asset. It is subject to distribution in the divorce decree. I have witnessed firsthand the family farm being parceled off to the kids, and then one of the kids got a divorce, and now the ex-son-in-law lives in the middle of the entire family. Imagine how that feels. And didn't have to be that way. They could have parceled it off to their child in a trust, and then that doesn't happen. And then at their passing, it goes to child, and it gets them through kind of that danger area. We're also, hey, people are starting their careers. Not every career goes well. Some people run into financial difficulty. You don't want it subject to a bankruptcy. You don't want it to be their asset. I had someone who came in and said, I deeded all this land 5 years ago in one day to my kid. Aren't we geniuses? I don't need any of your fancy planning. And it was funny. And we sat down and I'm like, no, you have outsmarted TennCare. I was like, congratulations. If your son hits the school bus full of kids tomorrow, you have lost your retirement. And they looked at me, they were mad. And I felt bad telling them that. But it's my duty to tell them the truth with absolute candor. And I said, that's your son's asset now. Oh, well, no, it's not. It's our retirement. No, it's not. The day you deeded it to him, it's his. Now, we were able to get the planning done and get things squared away. But that was a real kind of punch in the gut to them. And they didn't like hearing that. And so it does matter how you do it. And so here it is, transferring all your assets to children. I consider this, I call this, there's a method, I've named this method. I call it the purposeful pauper. Well, I'll qualify here for TennCare. We're just going to give everything away. Why on earth would you give everything away? Why would you tell mom and dad to give it? They've worked a lifetime for this. These are their resources and their assets. They have a right for them to work for them and to be able to live off of them. The goal is just to do it in the most prudent manner possible that protects them and ensures they don't spend wastefully or needlessly. If you give things away, you are going to be subject to a penalty. And if you don't get through the 5-year look-back clock, then you're going to be dealing with a very difficult penalty. And you can have tax consequences. It's not pretty. Impact to joint accounts. We'll outsmart them. I'll just put all the kids' names on the accounts. And now, there's 4 kids. Now, mom and dad, if it's just mom still around, and that's usually what happens is one of the parents passes and then all the kids go, well, we better get our names on all the accounts. That's a gift. Because everyone has equal access to that, that is a gift, and you are going to be penalized for that. Now, can you cure gifts? Absolutely. But the preference is you don't want to be making all these unnecessary moves because then you're going to be answering more and more questions, and it's difficult. Do it right the first time. Now, I think this kind of goes without saying. When people go and do this themselves, what do they say? A little bit of knowledge is dangerous. And it can, in our realm, it can be very dangerous. People think that they know the rules and they will come in kind of and taking a bunch of half measures. And we can fix them, but it's a lot more difficult. I always talk to people, I'll refer to the sandbox that I have to play in. You come in at 65 years old, and you're in pretty good health, my sandbox is huge. I'm looking at a 5-year look back trust for a home, looking at testamentary special needs trust wills, protect some of the liquid assets from the surviving spouse. There are just all sorts of things, and especially when we have financial planners involved and whatnot, and we get everyone on the same sheet of music. The kids know what the plan is, so whatever event happens, we're prepared for it. And that makes a huge difference. You come in at 70 or 75 years old, you come in and your health is starting to decline. Am I going to make it through a 5-year look back clock? What are my options? Your sandbox gets smaller. And then you have, and these come into us every week. Mom or dad is in the skilled nursing facility. They had a fall. It was pretty catastrophic. It was in conjunction with a stroke. We have done no planning. They're in a skilled nursing facility and they're telling us they're never moving out. Well, now there is much less that you can do, and it's a lot more heavy lifting. And we don't want people in that position because it's frightening. The people who come in that scenario, the kids are scared because they've looked at the bank account and they've looked at the resources and they have done the quick math. They know what that first month, when that first bill from the skilled nursing facility hits, they know we don't have it. And that is not a great moment for a family. Now, we have our battle drill and we know how to get through it, and they walk out and you can see the sense of relief. But to save yourself from that heartache, to save yourself from that unknown, it makes a huge difference. So the old adage, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the second best time to plant a tree? It's today. And so I always tell people come in and they'll say, Chris, we know we're late doing this. And I'll look at them and I'll say, unless they're that last case I just described, I'll tell you, no, they're not. Absolutely, you guys are not late because you're doing it. The vast majority of people don't do this. And that's the problem. Those are the people that's late. It's never too late to get your ducks in a row. It's never too late to get this done. And when you do it, and people ask, like, do you enjoy your job? And this is another one I'm going to steal from Tim. Tim would do this at, we'd go to CLEs and other events and functions where other attorneys say, raise your hand if you're the happiest lawyer you know. And I am. I'm not hooking and jabbing in a courtroom, where everyone's going to walk out unhappy at the end of the day. I'm not sitting here picking fights with people. I'm helping kids and taking care of mom and dad, and I'm helping mom and dad make sure that the kids don't have to do a lot because they've got everything in order. It's one of the best feelings in the world. It makes such a huge difference, and people walk out of there going, yeah, this is where we want to be. We've got it squared away. That is off the radar. And when something happens, they've got that binder, and they pick up that binder, they open it up, and what do we say? We say, call us. If you have an event, call us. And that's how we do it. And we love what we do. And at this point, what I'll do is, I think I've talked long enough. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
I got one. Let's say that you have your power of attorney and you have your healthcare power of attorney. At what point or how is it determined that the parent doesn't meet 2 out of 5 or whatever the test is, where you can actually step in?
Well, that's a great question. So, and this is another one of our philosophical ones. So on a general power of attorney, well, I'll do the general one first. I'm going to deal with, each power of attorney differently. On a general power of attorney, you can really have 2 different versions. You can have one that's in effect immediately. It's effective immediately. That's the one in the majority of cases I will recommend. And here's why. The other version would be what's known as a springing. And a springing power of attorney does exactly what it sounds. When the person loses capacity, it springs forth into existence, except magically it doesn't happen. We all know the devil's always in the details. Let me walk you mechanically how it happens when you have a springing power of attorney. Mom and dad are power of attorney for each other. Very common scenario. And let's just say, for instance, that dad, is the bill payer and all that other stuff, and has a stroke, incapacitated, taken to the hospital. Mom all of a sudden has all of these things on her plate, and she has a power of attorney. But that power of attorney, she looks at it and she goes, well, it says I have the authority, but I'm sure I need a letter or something. So now she's worried about making healthcare decisions. She's worried that the person who kind of ran things isn't running, and she's got to figure out everything that's going on. She's frazzled because the person, the love of her life that she's been married to for the last 40 years, their health is very uncertain at this point. And now she runs to the doctor and says, I need you to write a letter. And when someone asks me I need to write a letter, the first question I ask is to who? And she's going to go, well, I'm not really sure who, because she's not really writing it to anybody. It's to the world. It's to whom it may concern. Okay, so I'm going to write a letter to everybody. What's it going to say? Well, it's going to say he's incapacitated and that I get in charge of all the finances. Well, if I'm a medical professional, the liability is written just all over. I want to be risk averse. I mean, as an estate planning attorney, risk averse, that's my middle name. And I would hope the doctors are too. And so they're sitting there going, well, I'm not excited to write this letter. Now, maybe the family physician will, who knows them, but usually it'll require two, and they got to be independent of one another. And so now, in their most frazzled and upset state imaginable, they're running around trying to get this letter signed. And then they have to take that letter with the power of attorney and make people rely on that letter. Well, you know that letter is written in a hurry. I've read them. The doctor barely gets it on letterhead, and there's 2 lines. This person lacks capacity, in my professional opinion. Signed, I am doctor, MD. And it's not a good scenario. You haven't set them up for success. So I will always say, make it effective immediately, and then you don't run into that. And people will say, well, then they can go to my bank account. Well, yeah, they can. And if you've put their name on the document and you worry about them going to your bank account and taking money out, you've put the wrong name on the document. Period, end of story. The most important decision our clients make are the key players that they put in place. And I emphasize that every time. When in doubt, leave them out. Simple. Now, that's easy and it's a good laugh line and whatnot, but here's another reality of the world. We have a growing population of unsupported elders. And it's not a funny conversation to them, because I've had the conversation where people don't have anybody, and I have it way more often than you think. And that's a hard conversation to have. When you can't think of someone to make your power of attorney, that you don't have someone close in your life, that's sad. It's very sad. And I talk about, what are the causes of this? Well, people are living longer. Some people don't have kids. We move a lot more. Think about it. 50 years ago, our society didn't move in the way we do. Shoot, I'm from Michigan. If you would ask me 20, 30 years ago if I'd be living in Middle Tennessee, I would have thought you were crazy. Now I can't imagine living anywhere else. It's amazing. But that when I first got here, I knew no one. I really did. And let me tell you, it's a sobering event to move into a community. I'm a veteran. I've lived in Hawaii, I've lived in Afghanistan, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Maryland. I lived everywhere. And then I decided to make life more difficult for myself. I was like, well, that's not hard enough. I'm going to move here. And then, we got a divorce. So the one person that I did know here didn't care for me very much anymore. And you sit there and you go, you start from ground zero with no network. I know what that feels like. It doesn't feel very good at all. That's where I might say a springing. Say, hey, if you have to have somebody, because you want to have somebody. I had someone came in, we executed a power of attorney. They came back and said, Chris, this isn't working. They're already trying to say they're the boss of me. And I said, we had kind of set up a trust and whatnot. And they said, you know what? I'm not sure I want them to be the backup trustee anymore. And I said, okay. It'll mean going to probate, and it'll mean the court watches everything. And they slapped the table, said, Chris, that's exactly what I want. I want a judge to keep an eye on them. And that was their own child. But I use that as an example because there's never a cookie cutter approach. And it takes me back to the beginning when I say, why do I start with those 3 questions? Because those 3 questions are going to draw out the root cause. I go through this, the best example I have, I go through this with my kid all the time. My kid he is an independent will. Let me tell you, I've learned a host of things from him. But he'll come home, I'll want him to do something. Dad, I don't want to do that. And really upset. And at first I used to bang my head against the wall like, me dad, you kid, do what I say. And then I finally got smart about this stuff, and I'd sit him down. I'd be like, all right, we've done this before, and usually it's, 2-hour path of pulling hair out. And then we finally get to the root cause. Hey man, tell me why. There's gotta be a reason why you don't want this. And what happens is when you know the why, when you understand the background, everything starts to make sense. And that's why I start at the 30,000 foot view. And then we'll zero in on what the right plan is. But it matters. With the healthcare power of attorney, it's a little different. Your healthcare, when you think about it, you don't need the power of attorney almost ever when you have capacity. Why? You're there. They're not operating on you without you being present, without you running the show and you're making all the decisions. When you're incapacitated, it's pretty obvious. The doctors, the medical professionals right there, they go, okay. And usually if it's a surgery or something, they say, who's your healthcare power of attorney? Now, I will say a side thing on living wills. You're going to hear all these terms used interchangeably. Words have meaning. It matters the language we use. Living will is kind of that document that says feeding tube, no feeding tube, resuscitate, do not resuscitate, kind of gives the roadmap. Again, it's not that it's a good or a bad document. If you ask what we recommend generally, it will be not to do a living will. And usually that blows people's minds, especially like, Chris, I want do not resuscitate. That's fine. Make the doctor talk to your healthcare power of attorney. Because what that living will cannot do is have a conversation with your doctor. It can't critically analyze your doctor. It can't look at all of the surrounding events and say, was this the issue that is going to do me in or not? I want that doctor to be challenged, not because I don't trust them. I think doctors do God's work. I think they're some of the most amazing people that walk this earth. But the problem is when you think that, you can slip into the belief that somehow they're infallible, and they're not. And like any other profession, they can make a mistake. We hope that they don't. But I want someone to look them in the eye, size them up, and make the healthcare decisions for you, knowing your wishes better than anyone under the sun, to be able to ask questions, push back, request or demand a second opinion, and then feel like, yes, we're making the right decision. And that no piece of paper is controlling your health. That another living, intelligent human being that you trust more than anyone on this earth is taking all of the facts, looking at them, analyzing them, understanding them, and applying them to the specific case. And with a living will, you're using a hatchet instead of a scalpel. My humble opinion. Now, unsupported elder, I might say, yeah, let's have a living will for this person, because maybe they don't have that person that they trust. So that's a whole lot on that. I hope that wasn't too much, but that's how we look at it. What other questions do we have?
I was going to say, what advice do you give somebody? So I have like a family member that just refuses to do estate planning, and I know they need to do estate planning if anything were to happen, or when something does happen. What type of advice I told them about probate court? I told them how all the assets can be divided up, but they have 4 children.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to get them into.
That's a great.
How to do estate planning, but I'm like, you need to do what you don't understand.
Yeah, that's a great question, and they probably don't understand, and that's unfortunate. There is no right. I don't have the. Here's the formula. You do X, Y, and Z. You're going to get them in. Here are some tips. The first thing is, excuse me, if you know someone or know someone mutually with them who has gone through it where the planning wasn't done, that conversation sobers people up quick, fast, and in a hurry. When you hear what happens when it goes badly, and you hear it from what I would call a personal testimonial from someone that they know and trust, that usually is pretty impactful. Another thing is we have it go in the other direction. I have people all the time, I look at their finances and go, we need someone running the show here. I don't have a financial planner running this. Look at all this stuff all over, and I call them the zombie accounts. It's an account they have because we've always just had it. No one's managing it. It's not doing the best. It's not set up for risk management, and it's not, They're not looking at how they're aging and maybe we want to restructure some things. And one of the things I did, and I tell you, I ran into this all the time, and I can't say that this works perfectly, but I got with a few people that I work with and trust, and I said, I recommend people, are kind of trusted sources. And a lot of times client just doesn't follow through, and it would drive me nuts. So now I try and set up the meeting, set up the next meeting with the financial planner in our meeting. And I'll say, listen, let me call. And I've talked to those offices, and we have a little battle drill. I'll say, hey, I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to call, and I'm going to have my client, when you hear it's me, they know. And say, I want to set up that meeting. Because let me tell you, if you set up that meeting in your meeting, the follow through goes through the roof. Instead of giving them a name, they write down a number on a scrap of paper, it gets washed in the washing machine, and they never think about it again. If you set up the meeting and help guide them a little bit along the way, the extra 5 or 10 minutes that has taken in my planning, and time, we all know, time's our most precious commodity. There's not enough of it in every single day. But that extra 5 or 10 minutes has been wildly impactful in making a difference in my clients' lives. And so now that's my rule instead of the exception. So I would suggest trying that. I'm sure you have, but you can lead a horse to water. You can't make them drink sometimes. And so it's frustrating. But I also, the life happening to you, that catches people's attention. It reminds them some things, again, we're all going to pass away. I mean, we talk about it, no one likes talking about what's going to happen to us all. It's part of the process. And when they start thinking about that and say, listen, do you want this stuff to be a surprise? Do you want it to be this horrible, ugly surprise for your kids? Or do you want to have it laid out? Do you want to have it structured? Most importantly, do you want your wishes honored? And I come back to that. I said that at the beginning. You'd be surprised how impactful that is. People realize, like, listen, this is your stuff. You have a great say in it. And don't you want to lay out how you want it to work and how you want to leave something good for the next generation that you're passing on to? And sometimes that's, but I always say try all avenues. You never know which one will work.
I tell the son, I'm like, well, just tell him this is what's going to happen, because I have had personal experience with that, with things going to probate court, and they say that they told them, and they don't do anything about it. So I was like, well, maybe I need to get involved somehow, just because I'm very concerned about it. Like, I want to make sure everything's protected.
Absolutely. No, and that's all, and that's the way you want to be. That's the way we all should be. These people have come to us because they want help. And oftentimes they need more help than just in one arena. And we want to capture all those arenas. What other questions? Did that cover it?
Good, thank you.
Thank you very much.